Welcome to Unit 1, General Physics. This is where our physics journey begins. And before we dive into all the complex stuff, we are going to lay a rock solid foundation. In this unit, we will cover the skills and concepts that you will use in every other topic of physics. Things like making accurate measurements, converting between units, understanding motion, and working with forces and energy. We will explore how to read instruments correctly, plot and interpret graphs, and use equations to describe the way objects move. We will also tackle the fundamentals of density, pressure, and moments, ideas that seem simple now, but are incredibly powerful once you start applying them to real-life situations. Think of this unit as a toolbox you will carry through the rest of the course. Every concept you master here will make later concepts, from waves to electricity, much easier to understand. So sharpen your pencils, clear your mind, and let's start building the foundations of your physics knowledge.
Alright, let's begin with the basics. Measurements. When you're measuring length, the tool you choose depends on the size of what you're measuring. For everyday measurements up to a meter rule is perfect. But if you need to measure something longer, like the length of a room, you would go for a measuring tape. Now for really small objects, like the thickness of a wire, we use a micrometer screw gauge. This tool gives you exactly precise measurements, often in hundredths of a millimeter. Moving on to time. Measuring time accurately is very important in physics experiments. You might use a simple clock, but for precision, a digital timer or stopwatch is ideal. This is especially true for things like timing how long a pendulum swings. In physics, we standardize our measurements using SI units, the international system. We have meter for length, second for time, kilogram for mass, Kelvin for temperature, and ampere for electric current. These are your base units. You will see them everywhere. Now let's talk about quantities. Scalars are quantities that only have magnitude, like mass or speed. Vectors have both magnitude and direction, like force or velocity. If you are adding vectors, you use geometry, not simple math. You will often use the Pythagoras theorem and trigonometry to find the resultant vector, both its size and its direction. Next up, we have the thickness and volume. For very thin things like paper, we often stack a bunch, measure the full height, and divide by the number of sheets to calculate the thickness. The volume can be calculated by using a measuring cylinder, or by calculation if it's a regular shape. And the most important is the method used to find the volume of irregular solids. For this, pour some water into a measuring cylinder and record its volume, say V1. Gently put a stone or the object into the water using a thread to avoid it from splashing. Record the new volume level from the cylinder, say V2. The volume of the stone is the difference between the two readings, which is V2 minus V1. Measuring the period of a pendulum requires multiple swings, since it would be inaccurate due to human reaction error. Let's say 20. Then you divide the total time by 20. Repeat it and take an average to reduce the random errors. And always remember to reset your stopwatch before starting. It avoids the systemic errors. And speaking of errors, there are two major types. One is systemic errors and the other one is parallax errors. Systemic errors often happen due to the faulty equipment or consistent mistakes. And parallax errors occur when your eye isn't level with the scale. Now let's move into one of the most fundamental concepts in physics, motion. First, let's understand the difference between distance and displacement. Distance is the total path an object travels, regardless of the direction. But displacement is different. It is the shortest path between the starting and ending point, and it includes the direction. So while distance is a scalar, displacement is a vector. Next, we have speed, velocity, and acceleration. Speed tells us how fast something is moving, while velocity also tells us the direction. For example, if a car moves at 60 km per hour towards the east, that's its velocity. Acceleration is the rate at which velocity changes. It could mean speeding up, slowing down, or changing direction. The formulas you need to know here are speed equals distance divided by time, and that's v equals s over t. Acceleration equals change in velocity per unit time. That is, a equals to delta v over delta t. Now let's look at graphs. A distance time graph gives you a picture of how far something has traveled over time. The steeper the line, the faster it's going. A horizontal line means there's no movement. That is, the object is at rest. A velocity time graph, on the other hand, helps us understand acceleration. The slope or gradient shows the acceleration, and the area under the graph shows the distance traveled. When acceleration is constant, we have three special equations. V equals to u plus at, s equals to ut plus half at squared, and v squared equals to 2u squared plus 2as. Here the v is the final velocity, u initial velocity, a the acceleration, s the distance traveled, and t the time. These equations come up often, so it's worth memorizing them. Now for free fall. When an object is falling only under the force of gravity, say in a vacuum, it accelerates at 9.8 meters per second square. But in real life, air resistance slows things down. Eventually, it balances the weight, and the object stops accelerating. That's called the terminal velocity, when the object falls at a constant speed because the forces are balanced. Let's now talk about mass, weight, and density. Three concepts that sound similar but are quite different. Mass is the amount of matter in an object. It stays the same no matter where you are, Earth, the Moon, or even in outer space. It is measured in kilograms. Weight, on the other hand, is the force of gravity acting on mass. So if gravity changes, the weight also changes. On the Moon, for example, your mass stays the same, but your weight is much less. The formula to calculate the weight is simple. Weight equals mass times gravity. That is, W equals mg. Density is about how compact matter is. It's mass divided by volume. That is, rho ma equals to m over v. A high density object has a lot of mass packed into a small volume. In this chapter, the most important concept to remember is the method to measure the density of an irregular object. Let me explain this in more detail. First, find its mass using imbalance. Then, use a measuring cylinder to find its volume by water displacement. Just subtract the initial water level from the final one after placing the object inside. Then plug the values into the density formula to calculate the density of that irregular object. Lastly, let's look at floating and sinking. A dense object sinks in a less dense liquid, while a less dense object floats. This is why oil floats on water, and why heavy metals sink while wood floats. The same density formula, ρ equals m over v, helps to explain this phenomenon. Now let's explore one of the most exciting and useful parts of physics, forces. A force is simply a push or a pull. It can make things move, stop, speed up, slow down, or even change shape. It's the reason we can lift a book, stretch a spring, or turn a doorknob. Let's start with what forces can do. When a force acts on an object, it can compress it, stretch it, change its shape, accelerate or decelerate it, or redirect its motion. One key law we use is Hooke's law when dealing with springs or elastic materials. It says the extension of a spring is directly proportional to the force applied, as long as it doesn't go past its elastic limit. Once stretched too far, it won't return to its original shape. The formula here is F equals to kx, where F is the resultant force, k is the spring constant, and x is the extension. Now on to Newton's laws of motion, the foundation of all force-related problems in physics. The first law, also known as the inertial law, states that objects stay still or move at constant velocity unless acted upon by a resultant force. The second law is an extension to the first law and is a quantitative representation of the first law. It states that the resultant force equals to mass times acceleration. That is, F equals to ma. The bigger the mass or the faster the acceleration, the greater the force is needed. Although the third law of motion is not in IGCSE syllabus, it is good to understand it for a full completeness. Third law states that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. If you push on a wall, it pushes back with the same force. Moving on to circular motion. Even if the speed is constant, the object is accelerating because the direction is changing in a circular path. This requires a centripetal force, which acts towards the center of the circle. It increases with more mass, faster speed, or a tighter curve, that is, a smaller radius of the circle. Next is the concept of the turning effects of forces, also called as moments. The formula to calculate the moment of an object is force times the perpendicular distance from the pivot. It tells us how effective a force is at rotating an object. When an object is balanced, the total clockwise moments equals the total anti-clockwise moments. This is called the principle of moments. Every object has a center of gravity, the point where its entire weight appears to act. For symmetrical objects, it's usually right at the center. This is what that determines the stability of an object. Talking about stability, let's look at what determines the stability of a body. A body is more stable when it has a wider base and its center of gravity is lower. That's why race cars are built low and wide. They're harder to tip over. Now let's talk about something super important in both physics and real life. Momentum. Momentum is all about motion and mass. If you ever tried to stopping a moving shopping cart or a speeding football player, you have felt a momentum in action. In physics terms, momentum is the product of an object's mass and its velocity. We write this as P equals to mv, where P is momentum, m is mass, and v is velocity. The greater the mass or the faster the object moves, the more the momentum it has. That's why it's harder to stop a truck than a bicycle, even if they are going at the same speed. One of the key principles in physics is that momentum is conserved as long as there is no external force is acting on the system. That means momentum before collision equals to the momentum after collision. Whether it's two cars crashing, a bullet hitting a block, or a skater pushing off another skater, the total momentum of the system stays the same before and after. Now, what happens if you want to change the momentum? You apply a force, and the longer you apply that force, the bigger the change. This leads to a concept called impulse. Impulse is defined as the product of force and time. It also equals to the change in momentum. That's why crumple zones are in cars and airbags save lives. They increase the time over which the force acts, reducing the impact force on the body. Finally, we can also relate momentum to force using Newton's second law. The force acting on an object is equal to the rate of change of momentum. So if momentum changes quickly, the force is big. In formula form, F equals to change in P over T. This is really useful in understanding everything from car crashes to rocket propulsion. I know it is now getting slightly boring, right? Just hearing me talking. Well, you need to jazz up right now because we are now moving on to something you deal with every day, even if you don't realize it. Pressure. In physics, pressure is the amount of force applied over a certain area. The formula is quite simple. Pressure equals force divided by area, or in symbols, P equals F over A. So if you apply the same force over a smaller area, the pressure increases. That's why a sharp knife cuts better. It concentrates force on a tiny surface. And it is also why snowshoes work. They spread your weight over a larger area so you don't sink into the snow. Now let's dive, literally, into liquid pressure. The deeper you go in a liquid, the greater the pressure. That's because the liquid above is pushing down with its weight. And there's a formula for that too. P equals rho g h, where the rho is the density of the liquid, g is the gravitational acceleration. Here at Earth it's 9.8 meter per second squared, and h is the depth below the surface. So denser the liquid, more depth, more pressure. That's why submarines need thick walls to survive at great depths. In real life, we are also surrounded by air, so we need to consider atmospheric pressure too. The total pressure at any point under a liquid is the total pressure equals to liquid pressure plus the atmospheric pressure. For example, A diver 10 meters underwater is not only dealing with the pressure from the water above him, but also the air pressing down from above the ocean surface. Pressure is everywhere. Car tires rely on the right internal pressure to grip the road. Cylinders work by changing pressure to draw in or push out fluid. Hydraulic systems, like those in car brakes, use liquid pressure to transfer force efficiently. We have now reached one of the most useful chapters in physics: energy, work, and power. This topic isn't just about the theory, it's what keeps the lights on, your phone charged, and your body moving. So, what exactly is energy? Let's start simple. Energy is the ability to do work. It comes in many forms: kinetic energy, potential energy, heat, light, sound, chemical energy, and more. Kinetic energy depends on the speed of an object. As the speed increases, the kinetic energy of the object increases too. The formula for calculating kinetic energy is as follows: energy equals to half mv squared, where m is the mass and v is the speed of the object. Next comes the gravitational potential energy. This energy depends on the height of where the object is. As the height of the object increases from the ground, the gravitational potential energy increases too. The formula to calculate the gravitational potential energy is energy equals mgh, where m is the mass, g is the gravitational constant, which is 9.8 meter per second squared, and h is the height. Moving on, we have the chemical energy. This energy is often stored in food, fuel, batteries, wood, humans, plants, and animals. Next up, we have the elastic energy, also known as strain energy. This increases when an object is stretched, compressed, or bent. Examples are springs and bows. The next energy store is internal energy, also known as the thermal energy. This is the total kinetic energy of the molecules of a substance. This increases when the temperature of the object increases. Last but not the least, we have the electrostatic and magnetic energy. These are energy stored in an electric field or a magnetic field simultaneously. One key rule to always remember is the law of conservation of energy. This states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred from one form to another. So for example, when you eat food, the chemical energy stored in the food is converted into kinetic energy when you move, or heat when you warm up. Work is done when a force moves an object in the direction of that force. The formula to calculate work is work equals force times distance moved in the direction of the force. Or in symbols, we simply write it as W equals to Fb. If nothing moves, no work is done, even if you are pushing really hard. The unit of work is the joule, also in symbols as J. 1 joule is the work done when a force of 1 Newton moves an object 1 meter. Moving on to power. Power is all about how quickly work is done. The formula to calculate the power in physics is power equals work divided by the time taken. Or in symbols, P equals W over T. So even though two people might do the same amount of work, whoever does it the faster uses more power. Power is measured in watts. 1 watt is 1 joule per second. Moving on to some practical knowledge. Not all energy are useful. Some of it is always lost. usually as heat or sound. That's why we calculate efficiency, which tells us how much of the input energy becomes useful output. The formula to calculate efficiency is efficiency equals useful energy output divided by the total energy input times 100%. For example, a light bulb might use 100 joules of energy and only 20 joules produce light. The rest becomes heat. This tells that the light bulb is only 20% efficient. And now we are on the edge of completing Unit 1. Let's wrap up by looking at the simple energy resources, where we actually get energy from. The renewable resources are solar power, wind power, hydroelectric power, geothermal and tidal energy. These don't run out and are much better for the environment. Then there are non-renewable resources like coal, oil and natural gas, nuclear power. These gives us a lot of energy, but often they pollute the surroundings and are very limited. Once we use them, they are gone. In the real world, we need a mix of energy sources, balancing cost, environmental impact, and availability. And that brings us to the end of Unit 1, General Physics. Congratulations on making it through. You have just laid the foundation for everything else you will learn in IGCSE Physics. In this unit, we covered the core measuring tools, how to work with quantities and vectors, explored motion, forces, momentum, energy, pressure, and how all of these concepts connect to the real world. More importantly, you didn't just memorize facts, you learned how to think like a physicist. You now know how to approach problems with logic, use formulas with confidence, and avoid common mistakes. If any part of this unit felt challenging, that's okay. Physics is not about being perfect on the first try. It's about progress, clarity, and consistent practice. So feel free to review anything that wasn't clear and use the quizzes and practice problems to sharpen your skills. You have built a strong base, and from here, things only get more interesting. So take a moment to celebrate this milestone. And when you are ready, we will move on to the next unit of your physics journey. Great job so far. Let's keep going.